Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. The Huntress has been live for about 11 and a half hours as I'm recording this video. Most of the people that I've spoken to that have been playing the class have not been particularly happy with it. And I'm going to limit this to people who have been playing using spears. Definitely if you're running a Huntress that's not using spears, you can make that work quite well. But there's a core part of the gameplay loop of the spear experience that doesn't feel like it's quite working at the time that I'm recording this video. What I wanted to do is look at the details of what the real problem is. Sometimes when you can isolate what exactly the problem is, you can solve it yourself, and sometimes it ends up being a case for grinding your games to have to solve it. I think this is actually one of the latter cases, but I want to outline what it is that's causing the Huntress to feel a bit unresponsive at times. So, with the Huntress, this is not obvious until you slow down your gameplay footage and you have a look at it at 40 or 50% play speed. So let's bring some up here. This is me, I'm in Act 3 at the moment, but I've gone back to Act 1. Very deliberately done this because I want to go to an area where I'm a god among insects. I want to go to an area where I can easily tank hits from monsters and I can easily do whatever I want to these monsters and they'll just fall over dead. So, what I'm doing here is I'm just running around this level 10 zone that has a lot of range monsters in it. And you'll see I'm frequently parrying. And then I'm frequently using the disengage mechanic. And when I'm doing this, I'm almost never getting any frenzy charges. The reason for this is twofold. Firstly, less importantly, because it doesn't come up except when you're a level 30 character going back into a level 10 zone. Firstly, there are times that I've just already killed the monster with a retaliatory attack after it's hit me. But the second and more important one is there are many times that I am successfully executing a parry against one of the monster projectiles that's coming in. And for a long time, I thought that this was evasion related. But what it turns out is that I am then executing a disengage maneuver, and that disengage is hitting something else other than the target I intended. Let's have a look at the exact wording on disengage, because it's not the way a lot of people parse it in their mind. The way that I parse this in my mind is consumes the parried buff on you to release a shockwave and grant you a frenzy charge. This is completely wrong, but it's very close to the wording there. The actual word is consumes the parried debuff on hitting enemies to release a shockwave and grant you a frenzy charge. So essentially, there are two different modes of disengage. There is classic disengage and there is uber disengage. You only really want uber disengage because that's the one that gives you the frenzy charge, and the frenzy charge is an essential tool for the Huntress to execute any of her other skills. A lot of the other Huntress skills in the kit, they rely upon consuming a frenzy charge, otherwise they have pretty derisory effects. So, what you need to do is actually strike the exact monster that you parried with your disengage. This is something that can be quite difficult to do, especially if that monster is a ranged monster at the back of the pack, particularly like it was when I was coming through this zone actually at level 10. At that point, it was actually very, very messy to walk around in this zone because those monsters, they're quite dangerous at level and they're able to rip me apart. But whenever I try to execute a parry disengage combo in order to build up some juice in order to fire off a decent lightning arrow, what ends up happening is that some other monster ends up in the way. That other monster ends up eating the disengage strike, and as a result, I don't necessarily hit the monster that I'm aiming for, I don't get an uber disengage, and I therefore don't get my frenzy charge. This is the reason that everything feels so unreliable in the Huntress at the moment, at least if you're playing with the spear toolkit. So, what solutions do we have available as players? Honestly, I'm not sure we really do. The solution that I'm using is to swap over to something that isn't using frenzy charges, and that is still to be playing Huntress with spears, but using the tech that is completely broken in Acts 1 and 2 and still pretty strong in Act 3, where you've got Stomping Ground that is supporting Rake. Rake is ridiculously good because it's a travel skill that does quite a lot of movement, and because it's a travel skill that does a lot of movement, it's really good with Stomping Ground. I've then gone and spec'd a bunch of strength into my build. This is a temporary solution until there's something else in the Huntress kit. But ultimately, or what I think the real problem is that with Disengage, grinding gear games have decided, right, we want there to be some marker on the monster that indicates that a successful parry has been executed. We want to reward the player for doing this by giving them a 50% damage buff on it, but that's going to be the way we're doing it. We're marking the monster. Instead, I think it would be necessary to mark the player, because once you've executed one of your parries, that's when it feels like it would be appropriate for you to get the disengage combos going. If this isn't changed in some way, I think the Huntress is just dead as a class until there's some other source of frenzy charges that's available, because ultimately so many of the skills that are tied to spears absolutely rely upon them. Anyways, I thought I would do a bit of a deep dive into this. This is the reason that it feels bad. It wasn't apparent until I slowed gameplay footage down to 40% speed. That allowed me to see what the problems were. I'll leave it there though. Maybe Varlobs have interesting results.